We had Shama Sawant, she is joining us, but there is a little bit delay. And we will have Tenmuri Soundararajan also joining us as a speaker. So meanwhile they join, I just wanted to give a brief overview of what we did, how it all happened, and where do we go from here, right? So this journey probably started for all of us like few years ago, where when Equality Labs started doing the survey and collecting data. Equality Lab survey has uh, been proven the most essential data, and it has been taken and is being used by by so many of these campaigns. um, the next thing that we did maybe 4 or 5 years ago was the first congressional hearing that we had on caste here in DC. That was the first one and one of its kind, and a women-led one as well. So it was really good to see the caste oppressed women leading the first congressional hearing. Pramila Jaipal's office was there, Ru Khanna's office was invited, AOC's office was there for that congressional hearing. So it was a really a landmark of its kind. Next, we saw a lot of universities starting, and it was in congressional hearing for the first time we demanded that caste should be added as a protected category. After that, we have seen a number of universities add caste as a protected category. The biggest win was when the biggest win that we got was when California State University System, which is a collaboration of 23 universities, they added caste as a protected category. And we were also in parallel trying to make sure Santa Clara, another city, adds caste as a protected category in California itself. The there was so much of support in our favor, but the vote never happened. But Seattle City, for the first time, becomes the first city outside of South Asia, as Bhanteji was pointing out as well. It becomes the first city to add caste as a protected category. This gives us a lot of power, and this gives us a lot of independence in terms of showing off our identity or not. It And now we know we are protected. We can go to HR if there is a caste-based discrimination in the workspace. We can because now the HRs of these big tech companies, specifically in Seattle City, because we have such big companies headquarters over there, these companies will be pushed to add caste also as a protected category. So it's a big achievement, and it is a big win for all of us. And a lot of effort went into doing this. We were looking, we were, so many organizations collaborated. There were more than 30 plus caste oppressed organizations who came together uh, for this one cause. There were 170 other organizations who were together again, in solidarity. And I'm being told that after the idea of what they can do in Seattle City came, after the idea came about caste ordinance, it took just 52 days in Seattle for them to actually make this resolution pass. So it is a big achievement, and this is how we can show what we can do to make sure we are protected, not just in US, but not just in India, but also in or in South Asia, but also in US. So without further ado, I would also like to actually Kshama Samant is running a little bit late, so before she joins, I would like to invite Tenmuri Soundararajan. As many of you know her, she was our ex-president of ANA, and she is the executive director of Equality Labs. She is again she's instrumental in the whole caste campaign in US, and Equality Lab survey is unparalleled. And all of the work about congressional hearing, and the work how caste can be added in protected category, as protected category in tech companies, be it in universities. She has been instrumental in most of these campaigns. So I would like to invite Tanmuri to talk to us about what can we do, what should our next steps be. So Tanmuri, if you are here, you can unmute yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. JB and Jay Savitri. It's such a pleasure to be here with everybody, and also for us to kind of think deeply about what are the ways that we want to continue building and developing and growing this work. And a couple things I wanted to share with folks, and I'm going to be sharing my screen so that we can. Consider some of the things that we are talking about. Is I wanted to explain how does an action like this win. And so, because some people, especially if you were not as directly involved with the campaign, you might be like, oh well, this happened just overnight. And actually there's many years of building the foundation for this, and we want to encourage people to also do similar things in their communities. And so knowing that pathway to power is super helpful. So, one way to kind of think about how we build power is, again, even before the Seattle win occurred, we've already had a foundation of close to 40 organizations that have added caste as a protected category. And, we have worked with most of those teams, and thanks to the work of Boston Study Group, who really opened up that conversation with Brandeis, we were able to really catalyze a lot of people that were coming through our Unlearning Caste Supremacy workshops to then work on caste as a protected category in their communities. And so have this recognized at the national level. So I'm going to go a little bit more into building out what the conversation looks like so you get a good vibe around it. Okay. So the first thing is you have a set of mass emails. And I think most people here were part of those conversations, but essentially having mass emails from multiple organizations to the city council basically shows our political heft as a community and who is concerned, especially since many of those emails identified folks from different racial backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, and different caste backgrounds. It shows how diverse and widespread our actions were. And our collective efforts led to thousands of people responding to the city council. And so that first layer is always going to need to be activated. So if you are ever in an Anna space or another embed crate space and you're hearing a request for emails, take that 5 minutes, make that effort, because it actually helps protect us all throughout the rest of the actions we do, which become increasingly more risky and challenging. But this is something everybody can do. And so I want to really get that encouragement from everyone. The second was mass testimony. And again, we've been doing this since the California textbooks from 2015. In the absence of data, testimony like this is considered qualitative data as opposed to quantitative data. And quantitative data, which has data points across many numbers of people, really, has a higher ranking than qualitative data, because there's something that can be extrapolated from quantitative numbers. But that said, still, mass testimony is what moves the heart. And when you move the heart, you move a mountain. So I think, it's very important that if people have the ability to speak, whether virtually or in person, those stories really matter. And I want to just give a shout out to all of the groups that brought people to testify, because, in the closed door conversations happening with the council members, the stories are what linger with people. And the fact that we had workers from many different institutions, we had people talking about it in interpersonal issues. It was really, really important. And I think another thing that we did really well is we stuck to messaging. And as we spoke about this earlier, we are there for love. We are there to build empathy, and we are focused on our rights. Let the opposition do the smearing and sound negative. We don't need to engage in that, because we already have truth on our side. So I think that we really exhibited a lot of message discipline, and that also was really powerful for our work. We also had support letters nationally. So, and this is work I think that all Ambedkarite groups could be even stronger in, but having key national figures as well as key national movements write in was really crucial to our support, because one of the things that our opponents want is really put into contestation who is the oppressed group that is there and who requires a remedy. And it can be really confusing, especially for white stakeholders, because they're like, well, this looks like angry brown people yelling at each other. So is there really a place, especially the opposition is very, very amoral and violent in the ways that they try to dispute, the experiences of Dalit discrimination, Dalit data, all of those things. So the arbiter of who basically authenticates what is the appropriate position here are all of the movements that flank us. So we had, and I'm going to go into this in a slide, but those national letters are crucial to that, and the local letters. So, when you're coming to like a municipal conversation or even a statewide conversation, the legislators care who is going to vote me in or vote me out on a vote that I make. So they need to see certain, boxes ticked in terms of, oh, the unions are coming in. Okay, they're one of my biggest donors. Okay, I'm not going to cross this issue, or, oh, this is all the DV orgs. Okay, I've got to really pay attention. So you have to know the notions of power for the people that you're advocating for in order to know what the lever point is. And I saw that Lama Rangol is here, and I really want to thank him for the advice he gave me, long time ago at the Columbia gathering where I first met him, where he's, because I asked him a question, how do we as, Democratic community, which is, doesn't have the same funding, doesn't have the same numbers, and we're not a community that's as violent as our bigots. How do we take them on? And, and usually I think many of our strategies are thinking about frontal strategies. We take them on forward. But Lama Rangol gave me this one thing where he's like, you can be the mouse around the elephant's knees. So if we think about the ways that, yes, we are small, but we have a lot of people who can go into many different sectors to build alliances for us. So we need to take the power that we have in a place like Vihara and go outside of the community, build relationships, whether that's interfaith, collaborations, issues related to women issues related to racial justice, issues related to workers' rights. whatever it might be, you need to activate those external relationships, because that is what changes it. And then, of course, there's like one-on-one advocacy that can be done, where you're meeting with council people or you're supporting other people that are doing one-on-one advocacy. And that one-on-one advocacy was really crucial, because up until the last minute, our opponents were trying to create lots of chaos. In fact, one opponent basically pretended he was affiliated with one of the largest providers of psychological services for the Asian American community, even though he'd been removed from that organization. So knowing that he was, trying to, play that charade, members of those organizations, because they were in touch with our coalition, basically quickly debunked that right away. So you can never underestimate one-on-one advocacy, as that's like a really crucial piece. So this model it doesn't change. It's exactly the same for each of these campaigns. So, we have to get used to it. You may be responsible for running one or managing one in your city or your state. So just know that this is the path. This is the path to power. And there's not a lot that goes from that. Now, the other thing is that, and people may have seen some of the op-eds that, Maya and Shahir and I wrote about this, but there was a very unique set of conditions in Seattle that was linked to gender-based issues that also was really key to our win. And that's because in most progressive cities, the people that are offering the services or organizing, most of them are actually women. So when you make gender-based connections related to all of these issues, it helps, because you have a ton of people in the city that are then going to move and make connections related to this issue. And this is something I really want to emphasize for everyone, because a lot of times people think about people outside of our community only when it comes time to protest. So let's say when Rohit Vemula was first institutionally murdered, or maybe the Hathras case, that's a time where, Ambedkarites might be doing a national protest. And during that time period, you're like, oh, we should call Black Lives Matter, or we need to call this group or that group. If you're waiting for the relationship building to happen at the time of protest, you're already too late. We need to be involved in a civic way with all of the people who are concerned about civil rights issues in our cities. And that is a growth curve I think all Ambedkarite groups could really do in a meaningful way over the next cycle of the next 6 months to a year. And it's a new thing. It may be you've never interacted with those groups before. Maybe it's just going to a volunteer meeting. Maybe you're helping to get the vote out. But this is a time where we cannot be in our silos. We have to build a lot of base building work within that. So, with Seattle, this started like almost 10 years ago. And at that time, we helped to bring, different women who were working on caste-based gender-based violence through the Dalit Women Fight campaign, which was a campaign of AIDMAM, of NCDHR. And through those relationships, met people who were interested in internationalism or seeing their issues through a global lens. Some of those people included Gabriel Theodoros, who is a very very loving, very well-connected Black internationalist who was really instrumental in this campaign to supporting and building relationships for us. This was also where we, started a relationship with API Chaya, one of the largest services providing gender-based violence and domestic violence in the city. And for people that don't know, API Chaya is also very much a political player in the city, because Primala J-Paul came from them. They're also connected to all of the unions. So they were really, really powerful as we started to build relationships with them. And so one of the things that happened after Dalit Women Fight is myself and Smita from Anna, we all did a lot of work with API Chaya to support survivors. So, our team did trainings with them to help them build their caste equity competency. If there were issues coming up related to trafficking or related to other genders, domestic violence, we were able to help bring a caste lens. And so those several years of work was really powerful. They also helped to distribute the EL survey at the time. And after years of working with each other in that way, we were able to work on a congressional briefing, because we kept seeing these issues come up from gender-based violence And the thing about why API Chaya and why these local relationships was really important was because API Chaya had relationships with unions. When we started to do the congressional briefing, all the dominant caste people tried to intimidate our two sponsor hearings, who was Representative Ro Khanna and Primala Jayapal. Primala Jayapal stayed in because her top donors were unions. API Chaya had all the unions as colleagues, and they asked them to write a letter to demand that she do this. Because of that, she stayed in. And because of that, we had the proof of the congressional briefing. We also had many congressional people that were very interested in this issue and supported us very strongly. And that was a powerful kind of landmark that kind of helped open up Seattle on this conversation. And then, of course, council member, Kashama Sawant, came into office, and one of her first things that she really worked on pretty intensely was the CAA campaign, which was a very kind of galvanizing political moment, especially at that time when the CAA passed. And out of that moment, groups like CISA were formed, Coalition for Indian Seattle Americans. There was a new invigoration of even more collaborations across the city around religious and minority issues. And we did an unlearning caste supremacy workshop. I can't remember if it was before or after, but again, a lot of the leaders who came out of that workshop were leaders, again, in Seattle, who began to do this work. So you see, it's a combination of relationship building, data development, ongoing advocacy, and relationship building. If there's anything that you walk away with this, it's that Dalits cannot be alone. You have to go out of your comfort zone and build with people in order to kind of create that process forward. And then the other thing I just wanted to kind of look at in terms of ally activation, because you may have a question, well, who are all the groups that came forward? So of course we had, our, Ambedkarite groups across the spectrum, and so many people work to mobilize folks, and just want to give them all shout outs, especially folks like Sandeep Loy, who really work to bring together Rabadasya communities across North America, and also many of the folks across all of the different organizations who activated. That was really powerful. However, just our groups is not enough. And the reason why is, again, our opponents are trying to make this a conversation of Dalits versus Hindus. And the other new thing that they've developed is now they have Dalit Hindu groups, also called Ambedkar Phule. and they're meant to basically, dispute the positions that we have, even though we represent hundreds of thousands of Dalits across North America. So the next phase is South Asian groups. And so we basically had all of those groups on lock, both in terms of Seattle and on the national level. And that's primarily because dominant caste groups have really hated South Asian formations because of their inherent hatred of other South Asian ethnicities. So this is a really big area that we have great relationships with. And I think in terms of EL, we've been building in this space for almost 15 years. So whether it's groups like SALT or SOAR, which is a network of DV organizations, this is a space that we can really control, and we need more of our people going into those spaces to really understand what's going on. Gender justice groups, which, I think were very, very critical. And, we had groups nationally like Ultraviolet, which sent in information, and also folks that, are very strong gender justice advocates inside the city operate in. So again, this is a place where in Ambedkarite spaces, women leaders, queer leaders, non-binary leaders are so crucial, because they will want to see that representation. They also want to hear how these issues impact them. So again, this is an example where we need all of our folks kind of activated. The other thing that I think was also really powerful was having racial allies, racial justice groups, which includes immigrant groups, Asian immigrant groups, as well as Black groups and Indigenous groups and Latinx groups. So those get activated when we're in relationship with them. And so, I think that this is, again, another big growth area that every Ambedkarite organization can. ANA has many chapters. Every chapter should be engaged with the folks that are doing this work locally. So I really, really recommend that you go forward into that process as much as you can. And I think, you know, two highlights that I want to link that were really powerful in both the racial justice and the union group is that you know, we had groups like the Asian Pacific arm of the AFL-CIO, you know, which has over 30 chapters across North America. They wrote a statement that was very strong, and you know, the council members responded because it was such a big deal to have them weigh in both at the local level and the national level. But we also had people like the Asian American Disinfo Table that was writing about disinfo, and those represent some of the largest networks of Asian American organizing in the country, as well as like Black leaders who were doing a lot of backdoor advocacy. And I think the work that our colleague Anila did with CISA to get a letter with, you know, so many organizations, including Black churches and Black organizations across the city, was so powerful. So this is the path that we need to really build. And, you know, it's okay, maybe not everybody has all these relationships in their local city, but all of these groups do exist in your city or in your state. And it's really time that you go forward within that context and create a pathway of shared values. You know, sometimes we have had our own separate value system because we have not been aware of how local organizers talk about their issues. This is the time to do it. This is the time to build, because you will need all of these relations in order to be able to win this campaign. And then I think I didn't get a chance to finish my presentation, but I think the other thing which I really wanted to also share with you is there is a pathway about how we also look at disinformation. And if you guys remember when we were in our groups, I was asking people, do anybody want to write op-eds? Does anybody want to write op-eds? And the reason why is that part of our journey around, you know, building a path to power is that we're in a very violent disinformation ecosystem. So it's an information war. And so, you know, not only are we going to have to win, we have to defend that win. And a big part of that is also about how we do our communications. So when you're thinking about an information war, how you plank out this conversation, the bottom base of that is the social media, the folks that are doing the, you know, those kind of conversations. The next layer is kind of like blog posts and video blogs. Then you have op-eds, and then you have coverage in the major news outlets. So I think that we did an excellent job of that campaign work in North America because we have those access points. We can, you know, because we've had like close to what, like 30 to 40 wins, we have a very strong pipeline already into the news media in North America. I think what our opposition is doing right now, post this loss, is they're basically taking advantage of the, you know, their coordinated inauthentic networks in India, and they're trying to just, you know, spread chaos everywhere. So, you know, again, they start with social media, you know, stuff. Then it goes to video blogs, then it goes to regular blogs, then it goes into coverage, and they just do op-ed after op-ed after op-ed. So this is a time, you know, not everybody has to do all sorts of things. You know, we can all start to specialize on particular tasks, but the vigilance needed to defend the wind is so crucial right now. So I really want to encourage people that, like, if you want to make an op-ed and you've never done an op-ed, this is the time. We have to place it everywhere. And, you know, and we know, like, because we have our disinformation researchers kind of monitoring the right wing, we anticipate like some form of litigation happening around Seattle in the next couple of weeks. So even though we've won, they're going to build a legal challenge, and their legal strategy, I think, is really about overturning democratic processes, because even though every win we've had comes with strong democratic processes, strong flanking, you know, bigots have to use their money and litigation to overturn what is just. And this is a very long tradition in civil rights history in the US. white people sued when Black people were trying to integrate, community institutions and schools. So this is the tradition that they want to lean into. Fine, let them do it. But I think our journey is to keep building power. So the win in Seattle will need to be defended because we have, and I think the way that we can defend it is by one, ensuring cases get filed, ensuring that we keep getting our story out about what's happening around this issue, and also building more campaigns. And I know that we have several state level campaigns that are in the process of kind of being developed right now. And so if folks want to get involved or learn more about them, just like reach out. But I'm really proud of us as a team, and we're learning and building new skills as a movement, which is why we need to kind of keep developing that. Back to you, Smita.
Hey, thank you so much, Senmori, for giving that overview of how to, proceed further in individual cities. We do see we have Kshama online, and I would like to take the pleasure of introducing Kshama Sawant. Shama Sawant is an Indian American politician and an economist who has served on Seattle City Council since 2014. She is a member of Socialist Alternative, the first and the only member of the party to be elected to public office. Sawant's campaign was successful in increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour 10 years ago. They led the Tax Amazon campaign. She introduced anti-CAA NRC resolution, and Seattle City became the first city to pass anti-CAA NRC resolution. Now, Seattle City has become the first city outside of South Asia to add caste as a protected category. We tried to do the same in Santa Clara, but the vote got postponed and they haven't voted yet. So, but in this whole process, I just saw how Kshama stood her ground like a rock to make sure council members vote yes and vote without delay. So, without further ado, I would like to invite the audacious Kshama Sawant. Kshama, you can unmute yourself and Kshama, you can unmute yourself. Okay.
Your phone here. Okay.
Hello.
Go ahead, Kshama. We are able to hear you and we are able to see you.
Did you hear you?
Kshama, we are able to see you and hear you.
Sorry, I apologize. I'm having some technical issues here and I couldn't hear your end, but I assume you want me to go ahead and speak.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Smita. Thank you, everyone from Ambedkar Association of North America. I really, really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you all. I just wanted to maybe go over a few points about how we won the ban on caste discrimination in Seattle and how we can help it spread to other cities. And if there's time, some thoughts on oppression as a whole. This is truly a historic victory, as I'm sure you all fully agree, because we've made Seattle not just the first city, but the first ever jurisdiction of any level, not only in the United States, but globally outside South Asia, to win a ban on caste discrimination. For the first time, for Dalit and other oppressed caste workers, Seattle law ends the invisibilizing and silencing of caste-based discrimination and outlaws it. It adds caste to the existing anti-discrimination law in the city, which already prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender, age, religion, and other characteristics. This means that if you experience caste discrimination at your workplace, for example, the city's law will now give you the right to sue this corporation in court. This is unprecedented outside South Asia. Caste discrimination, as we all know, is a very serious issue in the United States, even though many outside the South Asian immigrant community may not be aware of it. I'm, of course, not going to go over the the incidents that we know have been made public, and also the case in California, the case against Cisco, and also the various statistical surveys that we know, because I know that everybody who's watching this knows that fully well. But I just want to make the point that it is precisely why that's the reason why we fought for this. I mean, just to quote Yashika Dutt, who wrote in the New York Times, in response to the Cisco case, she said, the technology giant got away with ignoring the persistent caste discrimination because American laws don't yet recognize caste discrimination as a valid form of exclusion, allowing companies to operate in willful ignorance of the terrifying realities of caste. This is exactly gets to the heart of the problem in terms of why the law needs to be changed. I mean, I don't think that's going to be enough, but that's the very first step. And that is why this is so historic. And this is exactly why we fought for the ban on caste discrimination in the first place. And we know that the data shows that we need to win this in many other cities outside Seattle as well, and in fact, even internationally outside South Asia. Many Dalit-led organizations have been part of building this movement and leading it, like the Ambedkar International Center, Ambedkar Association of North America, this organization that has convened today's meeting, Ambedkar King Study Circle, and Equality Labs. Very important contributions by so many organizations. And one reason this movement was so strong was because we had tremendous unity across caste, religion, and nationality among working people. So some of the other organizations who played a leading role also are, many of them are dominant caste Hindus, like in this coalition of Seattle Indian Americans, the Indian American Muslim Council, Sikh organizations, and my own political organization, Socialist Alternative. We had Dalit working people and activists join us from across the United States. We were even joined by Sikh Ravidasiya Dalit community activists from British Columbia in Canada. And one of the activists who joined us, I'm sure many of you know, was Prem Pariyar. Prem, as we all know, was instrumental in winning the ban on caste discrimination on the 23 campuses of the California State University, or Cal State, which is the largest public four-year university system in the United States. Many other organizations, Dalit-led organizations, also played a big role in winning that. And as Prem and other Dalits have observed, that when they came to the United States, they thought they were leaving the caste system behind. But unfortunately, as they realized the caste system was alive and well here within the South Asian community. Our ordinance was also supported by organizations like Hindus for Human Rights, unions like the Alphabet Workers Union, which represents Google workers, and also by major organizations like Amnesty International. We also had strong support from Ashwini KP, who is Dalit herself, and she is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance. We also had the support of academic scholars like Professors Ajanta Subramanian, Sonia Thomas, and so many others. The fact that this victory was won in Seattle is far from incidental. It has everything to do with the fact that we have a socialist elected office through my office, and that we built a fighting movement. These two were absolutely crucial components without which we would not have won this. And this is a lesson we need to learn in order to make sure that we win in the future as well. And also if we are to win lawsuits based on this law in Seattle. And I just wanted to share very quickly that the genesis of what we ended up winning on the caste discrimination ban, the genesis of this movement really came together in many ways around another issue of oppression, which some of you, I don't know if you might be aware or not about it, but it was 3 years ago. In January of 2020, local organizations protested in Seattle against the anti-Muslim, anti-oppressed caste, anti-poor CAA and RC citizenship laws by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Hindu fundamentalist BJP regime. And at that protest, where I spoke as a council member and socialist elected representative, we suggested that we should fight to win a resolution in the Seattle City Council, a resolution condemning the CAA and RC and urging the United States Congress to do the same. The lead activists at the protest, which included organizations like the Indian American Muslim Council, the Coalition of Seattle Indian Americans, and also Dalit-led organizations like Quality Labs, which also joined the struggle. They all immediately agreed, and we won this resolution with a unanimous vote from the city council. This resolution was groundbreaking because it was the first such resolution outside India that condemned the CAA NRC. But just like winning this caste legislation, which I'll come to in a second, winning that resolution was far from straightforward. Neither of these were easy or straightforward. We won only after overcoming a massive fight back from after building a massive fight back against the Modi-aligned Hindu right wing. The right wing turned up in Seattle, I'm talking about 3 years ago, in huge numbers and viciously opposed our resolution. The Modi regime's Indian consulate in San Francisco sent the city council a letter claiming that the resolution from my office should be withdrawn because, according to them, it completely misrepresented the CA NRC. But the Hindu right wing were not the only forces we were up against. As many of you who live in the United States, you know that most cities are controlled by the Democratic Party establishment, which has real differences from the Republican Party. The Republican Party is openly right-wing, openly anti-worker and anti-poor and anti-immigrant. Democratic Party is not the same, and some of its politicians have progressive rhetoric. Nonetheless, it has some things in common with the Republicans. They are just as loyal to the interests of the billionaire class and the wealthy as are Republicans. And despite their progressive rhetoric, the Democrats really do not like to take any bold or stand on progressive issues unless they're forced to by movements of working people. And so, in Seattle, there's 8 Democrats and me, 1 socialist or Marxist. And how we won that resolution and also this caste ordinance are concrete examples of how Socialist Alternative, my political organization, and I and our movements have used our elected office for 10 years now, which is a fundamentally different approach to politics than Democrats or Republicans. I'm not a careerist politician. This office is not about making my own, padding up my own political resume. Socialist Alternative is a democratic organization. Our members discuss, debate, and vote on what campaign to run, what the campaign platform should be, who the candidate should be. And it's this approach that we used. And this also means that even though the Seattle City Council pays me the second highest city council salary, the highest is LA, the second highest city council salary, it's a very lavish salary, it's almost $150,000. I take home only the average worker's wage, and the rest of my salary after taxes goes into building social movements like the movement against caste discrimination. Most importantly, our Marxist approach to politics means using a fighting strategy to build movements around concrete demands and to win those demands. And also, while winning those demands, we explain why, as hard as it will be to win reforms under capitalism, it will not be enough, and we need a fundamental shift to socialism. And a crucial part, a very important practical part of this approach is understanding that for me as a council member, the Democratic Party council members or other politicians are not my colleagues. If they represent mostly big business and the status quo, then I'm not on their side, they're not on mine. I am there to fight for working people and the oppressed. I'm not there to make backroom deals with the Democrats. To the extent that they agree with us, absolutely, we want to fight alongside them. Unfortunately, though, in the overwhelming majority of instances, the Democrats have not been on our side, and they have proven this from the very first moment. And despite that, my office has a long track record of winning unheard of victories because we understand that our unflinching loyalty has to be with working people, the oppressed, and the marginalized. And it is through this political clarity that we have won 4 elections in Seattle, despite the fact that big corporations like Amazon and billionaires like Jeff Bezos, like corporate landlords, and the Democratic Party itself have strenuously opposed us and spent millions of dollars trying to defeat us. And it's through this fighting approach, building movements on the ground and not trying to cozy up to politicians at the top. It's through that approach that we won the $15 an hour minimum wage. We won the Amazon tax, taxing big business to fund affordable housing. We won a whole series of renters' rights. And each time we won unanimous or majority vote from the Democrats. But again, we won it by building movements that boldly called out which side the Democrats need to be on. And that's a strategy we brought for the anti-CAA NRC resolution as well in 2020. At that time, just to quickly share with you, many of the Democrats on the city council were actually quite angry with me for bringing this resolution. Some of them even shouted at me in the offices, and I share this to you not to personalize it, but to explain this is what happens behind the scenes. Most people will not know that this is happening. They were angry. They said, "Why are you bringing this?" They really did not want to take a public position against the Modi regime, and behind the scenes, many were getting ready to vote no. What we did instead, to counter that, is not trying to convince them in behind the scenes, because they were not going to be convinced that way. Although of course we tried, but that was not what was going to do it. So instead, we brought hundreds of people to City Hall. Many people who are watching this probably were part of that. As I said, that new movement united Hindus, Muslims, Dalits, members of my own organization, Socialist Alternative, and union members. And together, we made it very clear, if the Democrats vote no, they will be siding with the right wing. And if they did that, they can't call themselves progressive, and that they will have to pay a political price for betraying working people and the oppressed. And it's the same approach we've used to win other victories as well with the South Asian community, which I won't get into because it will take more time. But fast forward to December 30th, just 2 months ago, there was a New Year's dinner of the same activist group that has been collaborating with us, fighting alongside us since January 2020. As I said, it includes Dalit leaders, it includes dominant caste Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, so socialists, from my organization. So we all met together, and several of us agreed we wanted to go again on the offensive for progressive demands. And there was also strong agreement that we wanted to win something big on the caste issue. And at that time, one of my fellow members in Socialist Alternative suggested this idea of fighting for an ordinance to ban caste discrimination in Seattle. This idea was greeted enthusiastically by the activists there. We built rapid discussions with Ambedkarite organizations, including yours, and also with other organizations. We developed the ordinance in collaboration with you all. We announced the ordinance in late January, and then the same day, we released a community petition that was eventually signed by thousands of working people, and they're not all Dalit or even South Asian. In fact, part of winning that support from American working class people was for us together collectively to carry out an education to explain that caste oppression, while it affects only certain immigrant communities, the way it manifests itself is no different than racism or sexism, and that we all need to unite against all forms of oppression. That's why we also got the support of unions, as I mentioned. And just like the CA and RC resolution, once again, there was huge opposition from the right wing. Smita and others were there, firsthand what it was like. We had really strong opposition from organizations like the Hindu American Foundation, the Coalition of Hindus of North America. And we need to be clear, this opposition was not just by innocent people. These are organizations, if you go and look at their website, which I'm sure many of you know, they have an overall right-wing ideology. They weren't just opposed to this ordinance. Their agenda is very aligned with the Modi regime and with the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. And in fact, the most high-profile organization against us was the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, and that was part of the education campaign we conducted as well. Socialist Alternative and my office brought forward the points to educate American workers about who the VHP is, why they have such a dangerous and far-right history, and why we need to make sure the Democrats know that if they voted no, that's whose side they're going to be. They're going to be on the side of VHP, and they don't want to do that if they don't want to go down in history having done that. But again, to be clear, Democratic council members, once again, were overwhelmingly not on our side in this fight. And in fact, they initially echoed some of the right-wing talking points. And some of you know what I'm talking about, because this discussion between me and the council members happened publicly on a city council Zoom meeting. And ultimately, all but one of the Democrats voted yes under pressure from our movement, but that was after we built a real momentum. And even on the day of the vote, the Democrats were hatching plans to delay or undermine the legislation. That very morning, the vote was going to be at 2:00. That very morning, I received a phone call, and some of you know this story already. I received a phone call from one of the council members who said they intended to bring forward an amendment to delay the law's implementation. This was just really stunning, because their stated reason for doing that was, they were concerned about inadequate funding for the city's Office of Civil Rights. Now, yes, it's true that the Office of Civil Rights is underfunded, but it has been underfunded chronically for years and years, and under the watch of successive Democratic Party mayors and city councils. And so it was completely disingenuous for them to bring this supposed concern to delay this historic ordinance in the name of underfunding, when these same Democrats have frequently opposed the efforts of our office and our movement, tax big business, to fully fund these departments. And so we made it very clear that if you do this, you are going to be empowering some of the most dangerous right-wing forces, in fact, far-right forces, and you're going to demoralize the movement of oppressed caste workers and those who are fighting for social justice and against caste discrimination. And we made it very clear, if you do this, we're going to publicly lambast you. This council member finally backed down, but I share this because it's a reminder of how crucial it is to mobilize working people to overcome establishment opposition and not have illusions in them. And really, Socialist Alternative and I believe we need a new party for working people and the oppressed. Of course, right now, what we need to do, as you are doing by organizing this meeting today, is we need to share the lessons far and wide, how we won, not only the fact that we won, but how we won. We need to share the real story of how we won, and not give a sort of a romanticized picture. We have to be very clear who was on our side, who was not, and why we needed to build a fighting movement to win this. And we need those lessons to be shared for two reasons. One, we need to spread the Seattle victory to other cities. We need to win a ban against caste discrimination in all the major cities where we have South Asian populations. And secondly, but not less, we need to put the new Seattle law into action by holding corporations accountable in the courts and successfully winning in the courts. And we've seen the corporate bosses, the billionaires, they are not on our side. We saw what happened at Microsoft. In Microsoft, there was a whole discussion about caste where people had sort of almost an open debate inside the corporation about caste discrimination, and some of the most derogatory remarks and slurs were uttered by dominant caste managers. And we also had dominant caste and Dalit unity against caste discrimination. But the people who were silent in this entire debate were the corporate bosses and billionaires who control the corporation. They have no interest in speaking up about this because it suits them to have these divisions. So we should, again, in terms of not having illusions, we should not have illusions in the political establishment, but also not have illusions in corporations. In order to win future victories, we will need to bring this fighting movement again and again. We're not going to be winning by establishing a consultancy firm or some steps like that. This is not a technocratic exercise. It is a political battle that must be won through fighting political strategy of going on the offensive, as we did together. One of the things we did especially through the absolutely courageous public comment, especially from our Dalit working people speakers, but also from everybody who spoke together. We made it very clear who's on the side of the legislation, who's not. In fact, we even had a leaflet that was titled "Which Side Are You On?", which showed the overpowering unity of progressive organizations on one side, and the other side, which was all right-wing organizations, including a spotlight on the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. So all of this was extremely important. So let's share these lessons. Let's also celebrate this just incredibly historic victory. Let's feel proud of what we have done together. And then just last thing I'll say before I end is, in addition to winning these reforms, as a socialist, I also believe that we have to fight against the capitalist system itself. As Malcolm X said, you can't have capitalism without racism. You can do a fill in the blank there. You can't have capitalism without sexism. You can't have capitalism without caste oppression. The history of American capitalism has shown how racism was developed systematically by the elite, by the wealthy plantation owners, to force society to stomach the unspeakable horrors of slavery. And this also helped them keep white workers in poverty, and by starkly dividing up sections of the working class while they made off with the lion's share of the profits. Similar dynamic unfolds across caste, across gender, where the vast majority of the wealth that workers produce goes to the top, and workers are divided on the basis of caste, race, religion. As Dr. Ambedkar himself said, This is not just a division of labor, it's a division of laborers. That is a very crucial point in which he captured how the system works. So let's remember that. Let's reject the divide and conquer strategy, and let's do what we know succeeds, as we have shown in Seattle and other successful movements throughout history have shown, where we unite the people who are oppressed in different ways and build principled movements against oppression and against economic exploitation both. That's when we are able to build the kind of unity that we can win. And also, let's be clear, we need movements explicitly to fight against discrimination and oppression, and we need to join them to the fight against the economic exploitation as well. So I hope, just in closing, I hope that you all will join us in building worker strike back. I don't know if many of you know, but this is in December, I will have finished a decade on the city council. I am not running for re-election again. Instead, Socialist Alternative and I and other organizations alongside us, we are launching a new nationwide movement called Worker Strike Back. Worker Strike Back activists themselves were part of this struggle to win the legislation against caste discrimination in Seattle. Worker Strike Back is an organization committed to organizing rank and file workers and community members who want to fight against the cost of living crisis, want to fight against oppression and discrimination. And we are going to have if you're going to be in Seattle, and if you can be in Seattle, please join us on Saturday, March 4th at 12 noon, when we will be having the big launch of Worker Strike Back. And we will have speakers there also to talk about how this legislation was won. The caste legislation was won as well, because as I said, the fight has to go on. I hope many of you will adopt Worker Strike Back as your own organization, will join us in continuing the fight back nationally and also internationally. Solidarity to everyone, and thank you so much.
Hey, Kshama, thank you so much for summarizing how we won this legislation. And thank you for, coming here and talking about it. If you have any questions, please raise your hands. Meanwhile, I have 3 people who I can recognize from Seattle, Lamaji, Raghav, and Tanmay. If they want to speak, please unmute yourself while we take questions as well. I see.
Shama, your first question comes from how organizations in India can support this campaign that you talked about to push it throughout the US. Do you want to comment on that? How Indian organizations can help support this? That would be a question for Shama. Okay. Tatinathji, please go ahead with your question.
I was going to say, Pankaj, in terms of how groups in India can help participate, I think what's very important is that we recognize we're part of a transnational movement, and that we also carry the same conversations that we need to have around accountability, especially because what we're seeing is there's a complete attempt by all of the right-wing forces to deny that caste exists in the United States. This is not anything that is unusual. We all know it. It has been there. But I think as long as we can just keep lifting up op-eds and things that are coming forward, the issues in India are also very severe. All across South Asia are severe. So I think, we don't want to take away from the focus that needs to be in South Asia for South Asian experiences, but just lifting up. And if you're hearing disinformation that tries to deny that caste exists across the diaspora, lift up the op-eds and the articles that come from our community. Those are like very small things that can help. And then if there's calls for actions for emails and such, those are be good. That'll also be good. But again, what we're doing in the diaspora is, if you're in South Asia, you need to focus on the livelihood and craziness of what's happening over there, given how brutal things are, especially as we've seen in IIT Mumbai, what's happened with another institutional murder. So it's more about our movements collaborating. And, if we have asks for each other, we can always make those asks clear.
Yeah, thank you, Tenmori. One more follow-up for you on that one would be, do we need to put up method or ways for these Indian organizations to be part of, say, a bigger network for equality labs or something to that nature where they can be connected? Um, is there a way we can do that? And if so, how?
Well, there is, I think Anna and many other groups are very connected with groups on the ground already, especially because of the development efforts related to public health and education. So what I would really recommend is actually that, all the groups that have those relationships convene periodically so people know what's going on. And if, and I think Vihara has been a successful it's like what decades that this has been going on, but essentially we need to have more open meetings and closed door meetings about what are the issues, because frankly, after the pandemic, our community is devastated. Every single development indicator for our community is in the toilet because of we've been pushed back, under extreme poverty. So I think that there's a lot that we need to do, both to kind of raise more resources, help make interventions that help people come back up again, and also hold this accountability related to caste and its travel. And, especially because we're seeing caste across many diasporas. So I would say there is work that's being done by existing orgs. It just needs to be strengthened. And we need to make sure that we have kind of cohesive strategy around it, because our opponents are very much against this issue. For example, I don't know if folks have known this, but, there is a recent advisory that the Indian government just released that any researchers that work on issues of caste will not be given a permit to research around the conditions of caste. So we are already in a situation where, if data is what drives change and the Indian government is saying you can't research and create that data, we are going to really have to work to get the stories and the quantitative and the qualitative data that shows what's happening for our people. We will need transnational processes to help move that out.
Okay.
Thank you, T. Your next question is coming for Shama. So with this legislation passed, is the Seattle city and the companies operating from there forced to provide training and awareness about caste discrimination to their employees and take disciplinary action if caste-based discrimination is reported by an employee? Shama, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Thank you for that question. And I apologize, I can't be on camera. I'm having technical problems on my laptop. So the main advantage that the Seattle anti-discrimination law offers to any type of discrimination is the private right of action, meaning the law allows you to, if the law deems that discrimination on the basis of some factor, some characteristic is illegal, then you can take the corporation to court and sue them, but of course you still have to win it. So the anti-discrimination law as a whole has been written years ago, and long before my time, written by Democrats, and it's not as strong as it could be. Actually, it should be a law that says that companies' license should be revoked, which it does say, but the city has not exercised that even once, as far as I know. And it should also levy heavy fines on the corporations. It does not do that. But what it does offer, and this is an important thing it offers, is, as I said, the right to sue the corporation in court. And so what it means is it's not going to automatically be enforced. I mean, there might be some automatic aspect of it, in the sense that just because our victory has been so high profile and we made it clear that to perpetuate caste discrimination is horrendous, and it is very it's a very right-wing position, and that it would be bad for corporations to do it. So it will have some deterrent effect on that. I'm sure corporations will think twice about this. However, as the example of Microsoft showed, I don't know how many of you know, but in Microsoft there was this open discussion, and yet the corporate bosses did nothing to stop it. I think that also shows that it's not in the interest of the bosses to proactively do anything unless it is required to. And in fact, somebody, I shared this on that day, on the day of the vote, somebody that morning asked me, oh, shouldn't you do this slowly so that corporations are educated? And my response to them was, the best way of educating them is to have a successful lawsuit against them that will show the corporate bosses that they're not going to get away with it, and having a legal precedent in court will be a huge step forward. So just to be sober about where we are, this is an absolutely earth-shattering victory, but we also need to go to the next step, which is winning in other cities, and also picking a strong case that can be taken to court. And as far as training is concerned, yes, we absolutely should push for training, but again, it's not going to happen automatically. So I would appeal that many of the tech workers who are part of this struggle, or if you weren't part of it but you are now inspired by it, let's have a discussion as soon as possible, so that we can organize a strategy to compel the corporate bosses to organize these trainings. But again, we want to take a very political approach, politicized approach to the trainings. We don't want to make it sort of something that you can just check off the box, so to say. We want genuine shifts in the way these corporations operate. We want a genuine sort of fear in the minds of the dominant caste managers, that if they end up discriminating, they're going to be held accountable. So that real culture of accountability needs to be brought in, and that will require all of us inside the corporations and outside of it really continuing to build our movement to do that.
Well, and Kishama, if I can just say, there are workers who already have been doing that. That's part of why I wanted, I think you may have missed some of that conversation earlier, but there's actually been a multi-year process of workers pushing different entities to add caste, to have awareness, to celebrate Dalit History Month. We obviously need to keep doing more of it, but I also think what is very important to know is that with the ban, workers who already have that precedent working with companies that have significant worker populations in Seattle can now go back and say, this ban is passed, can we move to have it in our corporation? So this work is iterative. So some people may have already kind of been able to do that first threshold. This now will take your work forward, whether you're at an academic university, because again, we still have wins happening across the university landscape. And so just from the Seattle win, a group that had been pushing for it at another university was able to get a unanimous vote for their process. So this is the time, if you've been waiting to add caste as a protected category in your corporation or university, this is a time to start that process and to really get activated, because the opponents are going to go with litigation. They're trying to intimidate people with litigation. However, that's always been the process of civil rights. So I think people should not feel intimidated by that, but keep building power around that.
No. Thanks. We will let Tanmay go ahead with your question next. Go ahead, Tanmay.
Yeah, actually, it's more than a question. Jai Bhim, everybody. Good morning. Thank you, Council Member Shama Shawan, for being here today and your insightful speech. I think one of the key input that Shama is giving it to all of us is it's been like 30-40 years we have been voicing concerns of Dalit atrocities that are happening in India, and educating the Western culture about it, awareness about it, and help us. However, I think that things have shifted. That there is a problem now where you live, where you work, and what Shama is is telling us that we need to voice those concerns that are happening right here. The concerns that are you take an examples of atrocities that happen as an indirect discrimination at work or a direct discrimination at work. And those voices are numb. Not having any legal protection has numbed those voices. No one is willing to talk. Everybody is very afraid of their jobs, very afraid of having any form of a retaliation. We need to look at this legislation as a way of getting those voices back and creating a movement which actually not just stops the ban, bans the caste using legal means, but use this opportunity to take some of those cases and take it to a next level. Of course, like we are going to get a lot of what you can say legal action by the right wing, where like hey, caste doesn't exist in this particular country. This would defame some of the religions. This would like uh, uh, reduce like the opportunities for South Indians in North America. All of that like pressure would mount on us. But what is extremely important for us is there have been lot of atrocity cases that have happened in United States and in Canada. When I talk to my friends in Vancouver, there are like white collar jobs like doctors have been outcasted when they presented their identity as a Dalit. And these cases now need to come out, and we need to like fight those lawsuits and win those lawsuits. That's the only way. I understand that we have a moral duty to help our friends and our community back in India. That is our number one job. However, this particular movement, we need to, like all of us, like, who are listening to this, including myself, have faced discrimination in corporates, in public forums and meetings. I would like, this particular, like, movement, we strongly, of course, like, it will take time to get to all of the cities and make this as a national law. But I would like, us focus on getting some of those cases up in the courts and win them to send a very strong message that this is absolutely not accepted in the country which fosters equality and non-discrimination. We have traveled so far to find justice, equality, and have a common ground, a common equal ground. And it's our right to have that equal ground.
Thanks, Tanmay, for those comments. Your next question is coming from Raghav. Raghav Kaushik, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay, cool. This is also more a comment than a question. So following up on what Tanmay and Shama said about using the law, right? I wanted to just kind of draw on inspiration from locally from civil rights movement, right? If you look at the civil rights movement, the legal arm of it was always a big part. I'm not even talking about the 1940s, 50s, right? With the Brown versus Board of Education, even Rosa Parks, the anti-segregation movements. There was a big legal arm to it, so they would try to see which cases we can take to court and use that to expand civil rights. So I think we should draw inspiration from that in a local context, and we should similarly use this law in the Seattle area to see what we can win in court, because the law is ultimately gives us a powerful tool, but it's a tool we need to use. I think there's also the analogy with the Prevention of Atrocities Act in India. That's also something for which the consciousness of the law and the ability to use it is pretty high, and that's the reason why the law is effective in the community. So I think that's another inspiration we can draw upon. Obviously, the law here is not quite like the Prevention of Atrocities Act. It's in the local context, but here the local context, the civil rights movement and its legal strategy would be a more direct inspiration. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thank you, Raghav. That's a very good point that you bring in. Ravi Kiran, you are next. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Ask the question, please.
Thank you, Pankaj. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead with your question.
Okay, Jai Bhim, everyone. First of all, thank you, Shama Sawant, for your extraordinary work, pioneering the ordinance, not only for tabling it, but making sure it is passed. We have heard numerous success of your landmark judgments in the city of Seattle, but very little about your personal life. Would be very interested to know your experiences as a student in Pune and Mumbai, how they have shaped your belief, specifically coming from privileged background. So we are excited to know any specific experiences that shaped the belief that you have right now. Thank you.
Should I go ahead, Pankaj?
Yes, please. Yeah. No, this is, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that question, Ravi Kiran. And by the way, I don't know if you people who are watching this know Ravi Kiran. Um, sorry, am I saying the name right or?
Yes, yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think maybe I'm confusing you with someone else. Anyway, thanks for that question. I hesitate to talk about myself because we do have, one of the ways in which the political establishment allows political parties like the Democrats and Republicans to continue decade after decade not representing the interests of ordinary people, of the masses, is by continually personalizing politics. So that's why I hesitate to speak about it. But I also appreciate your question, Ravi Kiran, that yes, it is important to share our stories because it shows you, for one, it shows you that there's actually nothing unique or alone about what we feel. Like, so many of us feel this throbbing outrage at injustice in our hearts, but for the most part, often, I mean, it's changing now, as Tanmay said, it's changing now. But for a long time, for many of us, I think you must have felt isolated because people around you didn't feel that way. That was basically the sum total of my experience growing up in India, where from as far back as I can remember, I felt just tremendous outrage, not only at the caste oppression that was very, very visible around me, all around me, but also against poverty. And at that time, I didn't have anybody to tell me a political analysis, a Marxist political analysis of how this is because of exploitative and class-based systems like capitalism. I had some instinctive understanding of it, but obviously, coming from a family that was not political and that was mostly very academically oriented, it was mostly in my own head, and I did, politically speaking, I did feel extremely isolated and alone at that time. And but I knew that I was on the right track. That this cannot be, because the overpowering feeling I had, and it was not just a feeling; it was also just an intellectual thought that it can't possibly be that this is the best that humanity can achieve. How is it possible that in the 20th century, at that time, 20th century, this is the best we can achieve, where there is an ocean of poverty and misery, not to mention the caste oppression, the caste-based violence, sexual violence around us. How could it possibly be that this is the best that humanity can achieve? There must be some stumbling block. And of course, it was just a quirk of fate that I had to come all the way to the west coast of the United States to run into people who were like-minded, people or members of socialist alternative, where it was confirmed to me that I'm not alone. Yes, this is true. And ironically, of course, in India, you should not be politically isolated. It just so happened that it was my experience. But on the left, there are so many organizations and movements that are courageously fighting back. And as I said before, it takes much more courage to be in India and do this and oppose the Modi regime, for example. But long story short, I did grow up in a dominant caste in a Brahmin family that hailed from South India. I grew up in Mumbai, and in to some degree, my own parents' outlook on life did affect me in a very positive way, because I noticed that they were among the very rare people who did not engage in caste-based slurs against oppressed caste people, and also treated people of other employment situations, like domestic workers and other workers. There's so many of them, that they treated them respectfully always. For example, there used to be the driver who used to drive my father and his co-workers. They were all civil engineers, and they had to go on site, to work on site in the construction sites, and they used to commute together. And I noticed that my father, was probably the only engineer in that whole group who spoke to the driver, who also happened to be from an oppressed caste, very respectfully. And that made a deep impression on my mind. And my dad never talked to me about these things explicitly, but just the way he interacted with people from oppressed caste, people from lower income backgrounds, it was very clear to me that that was the right thing to do. My mom read me stories of fight back against sexual oppression, and caste oppression. At that time, she used to read stories in Kannada and then translate them to me. So all of this did have an influence on me, but ultimately, yeah, I do think we need a scientific analysis of why this is happening as well.
Yeah, thank you, Kshama, for sharing your personal experiences as well. Your next question comes from Rayadas Mantena. Right, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Pankaj, for allowing me to speak. So, I've been saying thank you. I think thank you is an understatement for what the work has been done. All the team members, I don't want to say the names, many are involved, but the three women I'm going to read out, Kshama, Smita, and also our courageous leader, Tanma and Tanmaji. And this is a historic feat. As Dr. Ambedkar said, when caste becomes an international issue, and then the solution comes. And not only the solution for America, the solution for India also comes out. And I think this is an amazing opportunity to witness. I never thought this is going to happen in my lifetime, and it happened. And thank you all the teams who are in the front line, and some worked directly, some worked indirectly. I spoke to my son. He works for University of Washington, D.C. You first generation kids, normally they're kind of, low under the carpet. I asked him, do you know this happened? He said, Dad, this is a huge news in Seattle. And he was so happy. He worked with the Black Lives Matters. But I just wanted to check with him if he knows the news. He said, Dad, I'm following it. This is a huge news. So, and now my question to you, Kshama, I'm sure you have a lot of pressure from all over. Your name, your caste is trending on the internet. Are you ready for the national level legislation ordinance? Are you ready? Do you have the same spirit that you had going into the Seattle? That's my question. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
Yeah, Kshama, please go ahead. No, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Pankaj. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I strongly agree with what you said at the beginning, that so many courageous people were involved. And as Tanmoy herself said, this extraordinary victory has come on the support of the work that was already done. As I'm sure it was mentioned. Sorry, my audio was not working, so I couldn't really participate in the earlier part of the discussion, and I missed a lot of it. But I'm sure it was mentioned, and I'm sure, as you all know, several activists on several universities have won ban on campuses. I mentioned one of them, Cal State. I'm sure others have mentioned Brandeis University, Colby College, and others. And all of this important work has been done. And as Tanmoy said, also the work that is being done in corporations. I think it's important to recognize that all of this collective work is important. And at the same time, in order to win big victories, and that goes to your main question here about how can we win nationally, we will need massive fight back type of approach. It will not, the fundamental make or break. You asked me, am I ready? Of course, I am absolutely ready. Socialist Alternative, my organization, and also Worker Strike Back, that we are the national movement we're launching. We absolutely want to take this fight forward. But we also have to be clear that it will go forward, not automatically, but only if we understand the lessons of how we won. I mean, it can't be, in a system like capitalism where as working people, and especially as oppressed community members in the working class, where we have everything stacked against us, where all the powers that be tacitly or openly, tacitly through the democratic establishment, openly to the Modi right wing, they're stacked against us. It is not possible to win such a gigantic victory as we have won if it were not for a fighting strategy. So, you can't separate one from the other. There is no convenient, nice, way where you collaborate with the forces of the ruling class and you win something big. Throughout history of class society, we can see that winning a measure of justice that is significant, that is of consequence, that actually makes measurable impact in people's standards of living, changes society in a significant way. To win anything like that, we will need a fight back against the powers that be, for the precise reason that the people who benefit from the status quo have no interest in changing it, and they will fight us tooth and nail one way or another. Whether, as I said, some will be openly fighting back, some will push back against us by simply being an obstacle and refusing to be on our side and doing everything in their power to not support us until the last second when we've built a strong enough movement. So opposition will come in all these forms, but opposition there will be. And if we want to take this national, let alone international, we will have to remember that it won't be Seattle Democrats, but it will be some other people. If we try to fight for it in Los Angeles, it will be Los Angeles Democratic establishment. It will be some other forces. It will be the powerful forces in any given region, and also some of the other people who will be aligned with them. I mean, sometimes you also run into situations where there are well-meaning leaders who don't want to fight because it makes them uncomfortable to fight against powerful people. And so despite their good intentions, they will end up betraying the movement. So we also have to overcome that kind of opposition. And so I think the most important thing we need immediately in order to win any of this is to have the discussions like the kind we're having now. I mean, but not to be, we are not a talk shop. We are talking about action, but action requires a clear strategy and clear analysis and a frank discussion about what works and what doesn't work. That's what we're doing today, and that's what we need. We need much more of that. And I strongly agree with Tanmay and Raghav that we need to put the Seattle law into action. In fact, let me just say, we're actually trying to do research in my office. Our policy analyst in our office is trying to do research on how corporations have been held accountable in Seattle on other forms of discrimination, and it's not very clear that it has been that successful. So, we've been talking to many of the Muslim activists who supported us, members of the Indian American Muslim Council who supported us in this fight against caste discrimination. They have been talking about how Muslim workers are being discriminated against. So in fact, a very important part of our strategy would be to have a series of strategy meetings where we unite both oppressed caste and Dalit workers and Muslim workers who are all facing discrimination, but on different counts, and really look for powerful opportunities to hold the corporations accountable in court and recognize, as our united movement did this time around, that a victory for any of these is a victory for all of us. So let's make sure that we take this fighting approach and the lessons of this movement and we share them together. And it's true that not everybody will agree with us immediately, and that's fine. We should not be speaking in an echo chamber. We should be discussing about what are the various points of debate are. We should discuss them openly and respectfully, and make sure that we do this. And yes, there will be a lot of pressure, as the person who asked the question, sorry, I don't remember your name, I apologize, but you're right, there will be a lot of pressure on all of us. There will be a lot of pressure on all the leaders of this movement to try and sell out, little bit here, a little bit there. So we will need a rank and file democracy in the movement, where the ordinary people in the movement, everybody who's part of the movement, get to hold all the people who are in the leadership of the movement, also hold them accountable as well, so that we make sure that our leaders are fighting for us every step of the way.
And I would just add, to what Tanmay brought up earlier around lawsuits. So every tactic that we do is going to face pushback. And, whether it's data collection, whether it's litigation, and I'm dropping into the chat one of the disinfo attacks against the John Doe at the Cisco case. So I think that, while, our allies like Professor Brown and Ann Ravel and other legal scholars have been saying, we need more cases, we need to take this to court. The reality is that it's terrifying for our people to come forward, because many of these cases don't resolve in a year. It's often 4 or 5 years of intensive violence. People will not have the strength to come forward if we as a movement are not flanking them. So again, part of the repetitive theme that you're hearing is that we need to be a united force. People need to be able to stand up and do those things. And we need to be in coordination with other movements. For example, if we see our path to power being a bill that eventually adds caste as a protected category, we need to make sure that we are not in conflict with other civil rights organizations. For example, we do not want to open up any of the civil rights legislations related to Title VII or Title IX, because if you open it up for caste, you also open it up for bigots to adjust this. So every single Black organization would oppose us because of that. However, we could take the path that, say, like the ADA did, for Disabilities Act, is just have an individual act related to that. And to get to that point, you have to do a lot of work to show the scope of the problem, build all of these different jurisdictions. So that strategy is the strategy we really need to be coordinated on, because if we kind of fall out of alignment, we make the wrong statements, we could actually cut off really core allies we need right from the beginning.
Yeah, thank you, Tenmori. And thank you again. Satinath, please be quick with your question. We wanted to take as many as possible, honoring Shama and Tenmori and everybody's time here. So please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, my first suggestion is that VHP, we should rechristen as a Vishwa hate propagator. Okay. And then I want to mention that they are oppressors of all the groups like Muslim, Dalit, Christians, Sikh, OBC, ST. Now, I don't know whether in America there are groups, activist groups from ST, OBC, Christian, Sikhs. And if there are, we should make a common cause with them to stand up against VHP and RSS, and join even their causes, whatever they may be, and make united effort. Last question is for Sawantji, that when can we see you in the House of Representatives? In the Senate, we already have Bernie with the socialist flag, but it would be nice if we could see a socialist flag in the House of Representatives. Thank you. Kudos to all of you for having won this cause in Seattle. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead, Shama.
Thank you. And first of all, I really, on your first point, I know that was not a question, but I think it's really worth responding to it. I really strongly agree that especially, I mean, this is more relevant in India. It's also probably relevant in the US as well, but much more strenuously relevant for the Indian political context, the question of uniting all the oppressed caste communities. It's always, I mean, it's fundamentally, I would say it's important, but especially given the recent events related to the BJP election victories and just the fact that they have held on to power for 8 years despite waves of opposition against them. I think all of this really is a grim reminder of exactly what you just said, that we need to build common cause among them, among all of these communities. And in fact, any even bigger point, in addition to that, is also is part of that goes hand in hand with overall building a unity in the working class in India. But also it requires, I mean, this requires a much longer conversation. Obviously, that's not our main focus here, but I just thought I'd say we also need a new party for working people in India as well. I mean, it's astounding. I mean, there's a multitude of parties in India, but not one of them actually is capable of building a fight back against Modi. And so, we've seen repeated waves of opposition, starting with demonetization, the anger against COVID deaths, and and there have been general strikes, largest general strikes in the global labor movement history. And with the main slogans of some of these general strikes, especially in 2018, 2019, and I was there personally in Bangalore when the general strike happened that year. The main slogan was Modi out, or Modi Hatao Desh Bachao. And yet now 8 years later, the BJP has still held on to power with its hateful agenda. I agree, it's an agenda of hate, really. But one of the ways in which they have done that, obviously they have consolidated their power, aligning themselves with the Indian billionaire class, and that is a fundamental aspect because they are the capitalist state in India. The BJP is the capitalist state right now in India. But the strategy that they have used on the ground is absolutely the most rotten divide and conquer type of strategy. But it's nothing new. It's something that class societies have done for thousands of years, and we saw that they were able to win the UP elections. I mean, in Uttar Pradesh, there was massive anger against the COVID deaths. I mean, the graphic photos of the dead bodies floating in the Ganga. I mean, it was just horrendous and horrific what happened to people there under Modi's watch in the complete mismanagement of the pandemic. And yet the BJP was able to win a landslide in the UP elections. Why? Because they used a very rotten but a conscious strategy of dividing up among the OBCs and in the other backward castes, and being able to build enough heft for themselves. And the reason they were able to do that is it's the absence. What's absent there? What's absent is a genuine party for the working class and for the oppressed, who can correctly push back against these divisive strategies and explain that OBCs and all the oppressed and all working people should actually unite against the BJP's divisive, hateful, and pro-corporate, pro-capitalist agenda. But in the absence of such a force, the BJP has been able to do it. And now what they're getting ready to do in order to ensure yet another victory in the 2024 elections, central government elections, is again they're using a similar strategy now with the Dalit Pasmanda Muslims. So this is going to go on unless we build a united strategy for the working class, and really a fighting strategy. Again, I won't repeat myself, but those are the points we need to keep discussing. And lastly, the question was about flying the socialist flag in US Congress. Absolutely. I think that would be phenomenal and amazing, and that needs to happen. The ideas and the analysis that we have brought through Socialist Alternative and through the movements we have built alongside you all in Seattle, these need to go national. Unfortunately, Socialist Alternative is a small organization, and at this moment, we don't see an opportunity for us to build that kind of campaign for Congress. It's not ruled out. We want to fly this flag in Congress. We want to win bigger victories. We want an elected representative who will use the approach like we have used in Seattle, bring that message to Congress, rally movements nationally around the issue of caste, around the issue of race, really fight for Black and brown community members, fight for working people, bring up the question of $20 an hour minimum wage, Medicare for all, really put a spotlight on the Democratic Party and completely shift the political landscape. This can be done with even one position, and it is important to win. At this moment, it's not clear that that's the path forward. That's why we are launching Workers Strike Back. So those of you who want to see that happening in Congress, for now, I really hope you will join Workers Strike Back. It doesn't matter where you are in the United States. Just go to workersstrikeback.org, all one word, workersstrikeback.org. Join us and let's build this movement at this given moment. And let's keep those opportunities alive, and if some of those come up, absolutely we will seize them.
Thank you very much, Kshama. Your next question comes from Monali. Monali, I had mistakenly lowered your hand, so please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all, I want to say quickly, thank you, and I'm really grateful, but I will try to not take a lot of space. So I'll ask all the questions quickly, and please feel free to answer whichever is convenient based on the time. So I have this couple of questions to understand how all this thing happened. So first question is what was the step-by-step action taken to reach to this point? My second question was what worked and what did not work at this particular time. And the third question is like, apart from spreading the words about the success of Seattle, what is the next step? What is the next step? The next city is to best to win. That was my fourth question. And my last question is like, is it, last two questions are, is it better to wait or to start working simultaneously in multiple cities? And you were the one of the strongest councilwomen who is astutely aware of the caste situations. So is it possible to replicate same in different states with the other councilwomen? And is this law protects caste discrimination? This law protects the caste discrimination work environment. But where the situation is very complicated, where the work people are meeting in a social situation, how this will impact. So these are all my questions. I know it is a lot of questions, and if this is going to be discussed in next meetings in a structured form, what would be the timing, and it will be monthly or all the stuff? Like if you can answer or summarize or whatever you can answer, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Shama, if you could just comment on the what are the next steps part, that would be nice.
Sure. Thank you for those questions. And Monali, I invite you to have a conversation offline with me or anybody from my office. We're happy to discuss more about what was the step-by-step and what worked and didn't work. And in fact, those are some of the fundamentally the most important questions, because otherwise we won't be able to win again and again and win in this big way. So in terms of next steps and other cities, yeah, first of all, just on, it's an interesting question you asked, Monali, that, should we do this just in an incremental way, or can we do it in multiple cities? In fact, doing it in multiple cities or beginning to push for it in multiple cities is actually a good strategy, because then simultaneously we can build these movements that will shore up one another, from different cities, and also at the same time build a spotlight on the political establishments of these cities together. So it's harder for them to wiggle out. If it's just one city, it will also make media, it will also acquire a media profile in a much bigger way if we do it in multiple cities. So it's actually not a bad strategy at all. We do want to we do want to do it in a strategic way, though. So obviously I would suggest that we don't do it just willy-nilly, but actually we have a group of people come together in a strategy meeting. Obviously, I'm not going to decide who should be there. Collectively, we should decide who should be there. We want to build democratically organized movements. And as I said, but for those movements to work, it's not like everybody can be at all meetings at all times. We do need representatives and leadership in the movement. There will always be leadership in movements. Let me be clear. Anybody who tells you that their leaderless movements win, it's never true. It's any movement, whether it wins or loses, or whether it stays loyal or betrays, will have leadership. The question is not whether leadership will be there. The question is what kind of leadership. So what we want, so Socialist Alternative and I insist on accountable leadership. We are not shy of helping to lead movements. We don't act, sort of falsely humble. We have a lot of ideas to contribute, and we are dogged about arguing for what we feel is the winning strategy, but that's not for ourselves or our own gains or glory. We gain nothing. We are working class people. We don't make any money, or we don't, we're not doing this for fame or fortune. We are against the establishment. Nobody's about to give us some high position or anywhere. We are here in it entirely for the movement, but we are also not shy of pushing for our ideas, because we know that they have a track record of winning. And so we want leadership, but we want accountable leadership. Just like we had in this movement, where there was a democratic discussion about how to do, what to do. And the same thing is true for the Tax Amazon movement, which also won a historic victory in 2020 in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement. We won the Amazon tax. And we won it at that time, despite some of the leaders telling us this is not a Black issue. We disagreed with them. In fact, tens of thousands of Black community members disagreed with them. They absolutely agreed that taxing Amazon for building affordable housing is absolutely a Black issue, because the Black working class is facing the most disproportionate attack on its housing rights through skyrocketing rents and being pushed out of the city, being disproportionately represented among homeless neighbors, and facing higher rates of eviction and so on. So I think that's the kind of leadership we want, the kind that will fight for the correct ideas and win over the rank and file of the movement. So that's what we will need to do in order to organize on these different cities. And part of that strategy, of course, will be to study the anti-discrimination law that is already in place in many of these cities. So, like once we decided in Seattle, when we decided we're going to do this, that's one of the first things my office did, is studied the law in Seattle and understood how we can bring caste. And in some cities, it may not be the easiest thing. And I agree with the point that was made that, we don't want to, we want to build unity with Black working class people and Latino immigrant working people. We want to build unity across these oppressed communities. And we want to make sure that whatever we do is taking the movement as a whole forward, everybody's interests forward. And so not every city's anti-discrimination law may be set up for that kind of thing. So we should strategically pick the cities where we can do that, pick the cities where we have activists on the ground who can fight for it, where we can build movements. And yeah, I mean, one specific question was, can we replicate this even if we won't have a South Asian American on the council? Look, the reality is, ironically, I mean, on like just conversely speaking, you could have a South Asian American on city council and not win it, because it's not about their identity, it's about their class interests, and it's about what side they're on. And unfortunately, most politicians today are not on our side. So regardless of where we build, and regardless of the ethnic identity of the council members, expect virtually none of them to be on our side on the get-go. Some of them might be, and that will be good. We should build unity with them. I'm just saying that you can't assume that they're going to be on your side, but also you can assume that most of them will not be on our side. In other words, we will need to build a fighting movement again in those cities in order to win this. So all of this discussion needs to happen. Hopefully that answered the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shama. Your next question comes from Southern Canada. Southern, please go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, we are able to hear you. Please go ahead.
Hi, JB everyone. My name is Vijay. I'm founder and executive director of Southern Canada. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
You can hear. Okay, thank you. So, first of all, I want to say, thanks to everyone, including Savant, Kshama Savant and Tenmoli and everyone who made it possible and made the history. So it's a very joy for all of us in the Western country, especially for Dalit and oppressed communities, right? So I want to say big thanks to everyone. I have two questions here. They could be interrelated. The first question is, this law is going to be applied to all the institutions in Seattle. So that is the one question. The other question is, if it's going to be implemented in all areas, then how the law enforcement is going to be sensitive about this, because they are the one going to be implemented, the police especially, right? They are the one going to be implemented this. So whether they are aware about the caste system and how do you practice, and the especially the terminology, right? So most of this casteist, casteism takes place in the terminology, right? So for example, like using the words, those are the very casteist words. So and especially whenever we think about that, it's mostly related, caste is most related to the the religious practices, right? Especially. So I have so many examples. So like, my friend recently called me saying that he went to the temple, Hindu temple, like the priest literally asked him what deity he practices. That means he wants to know what caste he is from. So I think he lied something, like, because he does not want the priest to be identified, right? So these are the practices happen in Western countries. It did not happen in India here. So how the police is going to be sensitive about this? How can they find it, right? That's very important. So just I have these questions, like, if somebody can answer that will be great. Thank you.
Shama, this might be for you as to how this would be implemented in different departments within Seattle City. What would be the way to move forward on that one?
Sure. I think, first of all, the part of the question was, does this apply to all institutions in Seattle? Absolutely, it does. And so because the overall anti-discrimination law in Seattle covers cases of discrimination not only in the workplace but also in public spaces, in education, in housing, in terms of applying for a mortgage loan, or if you are a renter and you are experiencing the discrimination at the hands of a dominant caste landlord. All of these cases would be covered by the law. As far as the question of law enforcement, it's not clear that they would be involved in any way at all, in the sense that virtually every example that I can think of in the United States would be a matter for civil courts, they would not be criminal cases. And I don't see, unless there's an overt case of violence, physical violence or something of that kind, these will be cases that will be litigated if and when we bring it's not as automatic. If and when we bring the cases to court, they will be litigated in civil court, not in criminal court. And also, even there, it's not, we don't expect just cases to come up willy-nilly. In fact, that would not be a good strategy. We need to, and this is the point that we've been emphasizing throughout this discussion, that we need winning cases. We need a strategic approach, and that also requires the movement to decide together, like, this is a strong case. Not every case will be something that will be obviously winnable in courts. Unfortunately, that's how the courts under capitalism decide, and so we have to be strategic in that also. But I would say just one point I would add, and this sort of came up just in my mind from the question that was just asked, is that if you in this what I'm about to say applies to situations inside corporations also. Not everything is, obviously the lawsuit, exercising the law, enforcing the law, using lawsuits, it's an important part of our strategy going forward, and that is something we should be working on. But it's not only that. I think we have to use the feeling of empowerment that we have achieved through this extraordinary victory, and also the unity that we have started building. We can't let this unity dissipate, and we shouldn't just wait for the next big thing to happen. We should be planning for the next big things, like court cases, to win lawsuits and to win in other cities, win the similar law in other cities. But in the meanwhile, we have to not let the energy and the enthusiasm from this movement dissipate. We need to start doing other things as well. So just to give you one concrete example, for example, that the Hindu temple example, where the oppressed caste person was treated so badly, and clearly this guy, this priest, whoever is trying to probe his the person's caste. I think when we start having incidents like that, we should go use other mechanisms also through the movement, and we should expose these people. Like, so a lot of these the Hindutva oriented institutions like temples and even other institutions, and including corporations, actually, they're able to carry this out, and they will continue to. Let's be clear, it's not like everything has changed. And yes, this is a monumental and earth-shattering event, but still expect the status quo to continue, because corporations don't have an incentive to change their own ways. We'll have to keep putting pressure on them. And that's doubly true for other smaller institutions like temples, which nobody knows this is happening. So I think what we should do is use the energy from our movement to build one or two street campaigns, street protests, where we expose these temples. Because part of the way they get away with it, this is what I was just saying, is because nobody knows that they're doing it. American working people might look at Hindu temples and think, well, these are, they respect. And of course, we progressives respect all religions. That's not the question. But no person can use religion as an excuse to abuse another person or discriminate against them. That's what we are against. So when that is happening, we should expose it. Just to give you a counter example, analogous example, not counter, when there were Christian business owners like bakeries and so on, they refused to serve LGBTQ people because supposedly that went against their religion, serving gay people. What happened? How did they get exposed? It was obviously there was a lawsuit, but I don't think there was a victory won there. But what did happen is there were protests by ordinary people outside those businesses, exposing them, shaming them in public. Like, this is a shameful thing. So we don't have an obligation to keep a secret. We have an obligation to expose it and shame them So if there's a glaring example of that kind, let's build a protest campaign outside those businesses, outside those corporations, bring the employees of those corporations together with people outside, working people outside, build a united campaign to expose them. That sort of thing, where they start fearing that, oh, if we continue this discrimination, if we do these horrendous things, if we direct slurs and derogatory remarks against Dalits, that we are going to be exposed and shamed, it will have a huge impact on how they act.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shama. We are running out of time. This was a very nice session. I wanted to invite ANA President Smita to make a vote of thanks on behalf of all of us, to Shama, to all the members who were part of this great ordinance that was brought forward and taking us to a very nice victory lap, a little victory lap, but we have more work to do. And thanks for reminding on that as well, Shama. You were absolutely clear in telling us what our steps are still pending that we still need to follow through. So, Smita, please go ahead. And we will take other questions in future sessions when we get a chance. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, so sorry that we have to cut down on questions because we are running out of time. But again, thank you so much, Kshama and Tanmuri, for your time. Thank you for coming onto this platform. The fight to cast injustice will continue. We are in this all together, and until every person gets justice, justice is not served. So our fight in this will continue, and thank you so much for all of the inputs and all of the points that you have put forth. And thank you for our overwhelming audience who has joined this call and have stayed till the very end. Thank you all.
Thank you, Smita. I just wanted to remind all participants, we run this conference call. This is like 14th year in running right now. Every week, same time, the 10 Eastern time that we start the call on. Please join us on our social media activities as well. Connect with us. And please do join this weekly Vihara every Sunday. Same time, same Zoom link. We will see you again. And I just wanted to thank everyone once more for getting us this sweet day for our US lives so far. We are looking forward for many better days ahead. Thank you very much again. Until we see you again, that's the moment to all of you.